Now, despite optimism around peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, Ukrainian cities are still being bombarded. So is a peace agreement realistic?
Let's now bring in the woman who was the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under the George Bush administration, and she's a current Associate Professor at Pepperdine University, and she's Colleen Graffy.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Professor. A really moving address by President Zelenskyy to Congress in the States yesterday, most of which was broadcast in Ukrainian, but he finished that speech with a few words in English. How powerful do you think that address was, and what was the reaction from the congressmen and women?
It was amazingly powerful. It was a historic event. This has never happened before, to have both houses of Congress there to hear a president who's under siege in the capital of another country. Members of Congress were moved to tears. They gave him a standing ovation. This was a bipartisan standing ovation and outpouring of concern and empathy. It was incredibly powerful. And Zelenskyy is admired throughout the world now. His name will be remembered for 1,000 years. The courage to stand up against a superpower, to stay in Ukraine, first of all, with his family, and then to rally the entire country and frankly, the entire world on behalf of Ukraine. It's stunning.
Colleen, what way does America come out of this and move on, and the interest in Ukraine? What lessons have been learnt that, certain things won't be repeated again?
Well, this story is not finished yet. We've got a long way to go, and the outcome is absolutely vital. Do we allow Russia to take and possess and occupy Ukraine? He will then be on the border of major NATO countries. He will be a thorn in the side of the West, as he has been for many, many years. It will also be an indication that it is the end of the post-war era. This is an era that said that the use of force and threat of force under Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter is over. I mean, this is something that has kept the peace for over 70 years. And he is now suggesting that you can use force to invade another country, and he doesn't even have a pretext to say that it was Article 51 self-defense. Nothing. And so he is seen as blatantly using this force, and really it's up to the international community to ensure that Putin, and it is Putin, it's clearly not Russia, as we're seeing from the protests of Russian people throughout the world. It is Putin's war, and he will be held accountable for it. And the fact that Biden called him a war criminal, I think, is completely appropriate.
Professor, when you look back to your regime, the George W. Bush times, would you hold your hand up and say, you guys maybe didn't hold him accountable over certain things, or do you think you did all that you could and should have done?
Well, I think everyone recognized Putin for who he was. The problem is having the political will to do something about it. For example, I remember we were just begging the EU not to allow Gazprom to have a monopoly over oil imports, and to be cutting off Ukraine, and to be setting up Nord Stream 2. And, the problem is that countries have to balance their need for oil. They want low energy prices. They're looking for jobs themselves. And so to get the political will of both the United States and the EU and other countries around the world was very difficult. I was there at Bucharest in 2005, the NATO summit, when George W. Bush administration was very adamant about trying to get Georgia and Ukraine in NATO. And it was France and Germany who said, no, we can't poke the Russian bear. We will put him in the defense, and then we'll be in trouble. So the administration backed down and said, all right, we won't give Georgia and Ukraine NATO membership. And then what happened? In August, the Bucharest summit was in April. In August, he invaded South Ossetia and Abkhazia and Georgia. and then in 2014, Crimea and the Donbas region of Ukraine. So what we learned from this is that when you try not to provoke Putin, when you try and think that you're dealing with a rational individual, it doesn't work. He sees it as a green light, and he sees it as an invitation to try and continue and take more.
Yeah. Just finally, Professor, I started by asking you about that address in Congress yesterday and those final words in English. And that was when Zelensky said, I'm addressing you, President Biden, not just as the leader of the world, but as, being able to bring peace to the world. And I just wonder, do you think that Putin sees a weakness in him? And this isn't a partisan question. I'm just asking you, because a little bit later on in front of the cameras, when a reporter said, do you think he's a war criminal? He said, no. And then he came back and realised he'd said the wrong thing. I mean, he doesn't feel often like he's on top of his game. What's your view?
Oh, well, he did say, yes, I think he's a war criminal.
Himself, he had actually walked back to the reporters and changed his answer because he'd made a mistake.
Well, I did not see that, but if that is the case, part of the concern is, do you say that someone's a war criminal when the International Criminal Court has not garnered all the information and it's just an allegation at this point? And so he perhaps was hedging his bets initially because we don't have confirmed evidence through the courts, but I think then he just said, to heck with it, and let's call it what we see on TV,
which is he is
a war criminal.
Okay, fair enough.
Professor, we've got to leave it there. Professor, can you actually see us by any chance? I know you can hear us.
I can see you, and happy St. Patrick's Day, and I hope you can see I'm wearing green. With a name like Colleen, this was an accident.
I just wanted, I didn't want that opportunity to pass. I saw her name's Colleen. She's got to have Irish roots. And as you can see, I'm matching you today. Couldn't find any shamrock. Very hard to get shamrock. But happy St. Patrick's Day.
We'll have to deal with that for next year.
We'll have to deal with that next year. Lovely talking to you, Professor. Fascinating insight and great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, and have a great day. Draw on your shamrock.
Thank you. I will.